Today, we are going to Japan, the land with an interesting history and culture. But we aren't looking too deeply into that. We are looking into one of their best fighters and possibly the most thankful and happiest fighters coming out of Naha, Okinawa. This man was born January 27th in the year 2000. That man is Tatsuro Taira. Many people assume that a fighter that is as young as he is and as high level as he is must have been training since he was a small child. While you'd be right most of the time, Tatsuro Taira is not one of those stories. Tatsuro actually started his sports career playing basketball in the 3rd grade all the way up to middle school, but he wasn't passionate about it and decided to take a break from the sport. Once he got into high school, he would be inspired by his older brother to try out kickboxing. At his local gym soon after starting kickboxing, he would transition to MMA. He had won an amateur Shudo tournament as well as the All Japan Amateur Shudo Championship tournament. He would end up going 10-0 in his amateur Shudo fights as well. Tatsuro Taira had made his professional debut on August 3rd, 2018, and his opponent would be Yo Otake in the quarterfinals in the Shudo tournament. This would turn out to be a one-sided beatdown that left Otake sleeping after being submitted with a triangle choke just 2 minutes into the first round. After steamrolling his opponent in his first fight, Taira would fight a few months later in the finals in November 2018. His opponent would be Ryo Yakawa, and in similar fashion to his last fight, Taira would put his opponent to sleep with a front choke just 3 minutes into the first round. Therefore, Taira would win the tournament. After winning the tournament and going 2-0, Taira would move down to men's strawweight, which is 115 pounds. His first fight at 115 would be in June of 2019. His opponent would be Yuta Sakaguchi. This would be a challenging fight for the young fighter, but at the end, Taira would win by unanimous decision. After this fight, Taira would move back up to flyweight. He would fight again in September of that same year, this time facing off with Takehiro Kahori. This would be another steamrolling from Taira because just 1 minute into the fight, he would take his opponent down and rain vicious ground and pound shots until the ref stepped in and stopped the fight. Taira would stay active and take on his next opponent just 2 months later in November against Yamato Takagi, and once again, he would rain brutal ground and pound and force the ref to step in, getting another TKO win in the first round. Taira would take December off and would fight again in January of 2020, this time facing off with Jared Almazan. This would go longer than his last 2 fights, but Taira would still get the finish in the second round after yet again raining brutal ground and pound. Taira would take a few months off and fight again in November. This fight would be at bantamweight against Kiyotaka Shimizu. Similar to the last time he moved down in weight, it would be a harder fight than expected, but he would still get the win by unanimous decision. Taira would take the rest of the year off and fight again in March of 2021. This time he would be facing off with Yashiro Maeda, but Taira would sink in the all-reliable rear naked choke in the first minute of the fight. This would be more than enough to get the title shot at flyweight. He would be fighting the champion Yuya Fukuda in July of 2021. This would turn out to be yet another walk in the park for Taira because he would sink in a triangle choke just 4 minutes into the first round and getting his first belt wrapped around his waist at just 21 years of age. Taira would switch promotions to the Vale Tudo Japan, also known as VTJ, on November 6, 2021. His first opponent in the new promotion would be Alfredo Muad, and once again Taira would smoke his opponent in the first round by rear naked choke. Taira was now 9-0, with most of his fights ending in a finish. This would catch the attention of the biggest promotion in the world, the UFC, and Taira would be scheduled to fight Carlos Pelinero on April 30th, 2022. But unfortunately, Carlos would get sick and the fight would be rescheduled for May 14th. And once the fight would take place, it would be a one-sided beatdown once again, but he would be unable to get the finish before the fight ended. But Taira would once again win by unanimous decision. After winning his UFC debut, he would fight again just a few months later in October against CJ Vergara. This would be a great fight, but Taira would get the armbar finish at the end of the second round. He would also get a $50,000 performance bonus after this great performance. Taira would stay active live and fight again in February of 2023 against Jesus Aguilar. This would be yet another steamrolling for the up-and-coming prospect, sinking in the triangle armbar in the first round, getting the win and yet another $50,000 performance bonus. Taira would be scheduled for another fight against Clayton Rodriguez, but Rodriguez would miss weight and the fight would get cancelled. So he would fight again just 2 weeks later in July against Edgar Chairez, and it would be another one-sided beatdown that left the judges no question as to who won the fight, and once again Taira would get the unanimous decision win. Taira would want to fight again before the end of the year, so he would sign another fight against David Dvorak in October, but it would get cancelled due to Dvorak being injured. So Taira would get a new opponent in December. That opponent would be Carlos Hernandez, and once again Taira would dominate Carlos and get the huge left hook that dropped him, and then Taira would finish him off with some vicious ground and pound in the second round. After getting 3 wins in the UFC in 2023, he would go into 2024 with a ton of momentum, so he would sign up to fight a UFC veteran in May. That veteran was Tim Elliott, but unfortunately this fight would also get cancelled due to Elliott pulling out, so the UFC would give Taira another fight, so the UFC would have Taira fight another up-and-coming prospect, Joshua Van. Unfortunately, this fight would get cancelled as well, but they were both rebooked to fight different opponents, as the UFC did not want 2 prospects fighting each other so early on in their careers. Taira's new opponent would be a huge step up in competition. That opponent would be Alex Perez, a very experienced veteran who just had a huge win over Mateus Nicolau. But Taira would pass this test with flying colors, not only showcasing his very high level fight IQ, but also his grappling, and it would be his grappling that would injure Perez's knee and force the fight to be stopped. His knee was hurt due to Taira landing a takedown by taking Alex's back and Taira's leg behind Alex's leg to try and trip him while he pulls back, which he pulled off perfectly, but unfortunately it would lead to the knee injury. But on the bright side, Taira would get awarded the TKO win. And that brings us to this weekend. Taira is set to face off with another high-level veteran in Brandon Royval, who has a 16-7 record with some nasty knockouts. But we aren't talking about Royval today. We are talking about the Japanese prospect. As you can tell, Taira has yet to get a single loss on his resume, as well as not having any split decision wins. All of them have been dominant, unanimous decisions. If you include his amateur fights, he is on an amazing 25-fight win streak at just 24 years old. Taira also has a 31% knockout rate and a 44% submission rate, with only 25% of his fights going to the judges. So if you do the quick math, this would mean Taira has a 75% finishing rate at flyweight, which puts him in the top 10% in his division. So it goes without saying who I'm picking in this fight. I think Tatsuro Taira will get the win, and he will probably end up submitting Royval either in the 3rd round or the 4th round. Royval comes out with very high energy and a very high output, which will lead him to gassing out the farther the fight goes, which is where Taira will shine. Who do you have winning this fight, and how high is Tatsuro Taira's ceiling? Will he become champion? Will he get fraud checked along the way? Let me know in the comments. If you watched the video this far, be sure to like and subscribe, as it is the only way to support the channel. I hope you guys have a great week and enjoy the fights this weekend. Bye!